Okay, so let's kick off day 2. Our second keynote is Justin Warren. Justin is the founder and principal analyst at Pivot9, a boutique consulting firm here in Melbourne. Justin's business focuses on free and open source software and has an impressive suite of customers, including ANZ Bank, IBM and Telstra. So, fun fact, I was actually speaking to Justin this morning and I had a different fun fact, but talking to him, he's a really interesting guy. If there is anyone in the audience here who's struggling on commercialising their product, talk to Justin. That's what he does. Is that a good enough plug? Yeah. So I guess Justin's passion sort of projects on the side are Python coding, and freedom of information. So if you catch him after this, please grab him on any of 3 of those topics. He would love to talk to you. So today, Justin will be sharing his insights on sustaining open source software tools for change, a topic that should be uppermost in our minds as we plan for future innovations on the Drupal platform. Please join me in welcoming Justin Warren.
Right, good morning DrupalSouth. So today I'm here to talk to you about sustaining open source software. Open source audience, I'm not going to tell you too much about open source you don't already know, but I do have some objectives here. You've already heard about who I am. This is me, that's my day job. I do a lot of work with big corporates, but in the last 10-15 years I've done a lot of work consulting to startups. And that's coloured my perceptions a little bit. We'll talk more about that in a moment. I maintain a few small projects and make the odd contribution to other open source projects here and there. I have been at it for a while, which you can see from some of the dates up there, and also just my general appearance. This is what working on open source does to you, apparently. So I do have a short or a quick content warning. There's nothing particularly triggering in this talk, but we will be talking about maintaining open source projects, and I know that there are some core maintainers in the audience, so you may understand why I'm putting that warning up there. If you know, you know. If you're not in a good place for hearing or thinking about any of this and you need to leave or block your ears or otherwise just check out for a bit, that's totally fine. Please go for it. As I said, there's nothing particularly triggering in it, as best I know, but I don't know what's going on in your life. Look after yourselves. Right. Sustainability of open source. Where should we begin? Well, I've been trying to figure this out for more than 25 years. I am not going to go over everything. I am going to generalize. I am going to oversimplify. There is nuance. There are exceptions. I get that. I cannot include all of it in this one talk. So if you want to come and argue with me about the details later, buy me a drink first. That'd be good. More than happy to talk about it. I'm not right about everything. These are just my opinions. What I want to do today is I want to unteach you some things. I want to help you unlearn some things that you've learned. I want you to forget some things that you think you know and that you believe to be true. And then I want to replace them with something else. I want to convince you of 4 things. First one is that maintenance is more important than creation. The second one is that ecosystems matter more than artifacts. That, press the button, that systems are more powerful than individuals, and that humans are more important than computers. The thing that we're talking about with sustainability of open source, I think can be summed up by this picture. First, oversimplification, but that's why people are annoyed. It's not only this, but it's a big part of it. What I want to do today is to look at why that happened and what we can do about it. Now, a quick warning, first bit of audience participation of the day. There will be more. Why this happened is the system is doing this because that's what it was designed to do. The purpose of a system is what it does. Why did we build this system then? Why did we think this was a good idea? And it's because we had some particular ideas about what software is. We thought software was special in that it's a non-rivalrous good that is basically free to duplicate. It's like maths. So if I teach you that 2 plus 2 is 4, I don't forget my own name or that calculus is a thing. Knowledge, like maths, is generally seen to be a public good, which is fine, but it causes some issues. And Adam Jacob kind of reminded me or crystallized this idea for me. I was having a talk with him at KubeCon last year, and he gave a really good talk, particularly if you're interested in monetization type things. I really recommend that you go to this talk. That's where that QR code goes. Trust me. You believe me, right? So Adam was really vehement when we were talking. He said, oh, the open source, like software is special because you can make copies of it and give it to other people, and the cost of distribution is basically free, and it's unique in this way. It's like, well, not really. I agreed with him, but because I'm a consultant, I do what consultants do, and that is I agreed with him in the most annoying way possible. And it was about one specific part of this. It was about that idea that software is special, and that giving it away was a great idea. And where we did agree was that if you want to make money as a company, giving your product away for free doesn't seem like a very smart thing to do. And yet, this exists. Many of you will recognize that, I hope. For those who don't, this is the CNCF landscape, so the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. They have this picture called the landscape. This is not all of it. This is a tiny bit of it up in the back top left corner. There's more. It's called an eye chart for a reason. So why have all these companies done this probably very silly thing of giving their stuff away for free? I would argue that it's because we, for a long time, have mistaken that what is popular equates to what is profitable. It's not a terrible thing to think that, because for some people, this was true. It did actually work out. A lot of people thought that they could do this by copying other companies like Google and Facebook that did this. And they made lots of people very rich indeed, and in fact, probably changed the world. The theory behind this idea is actually sound. Like there are marketing textbooks that have this. This is a picture of it. I've drawn it. It's not to scale. This is the idea of penetration pricing. So on this, you can see there's a vertical axis, which is the cost, or how much it costs things, and what the volume is. What this summarizes is that if you charge people money for something, like there's a certain willingness to pay. People are willing to pay a certain amount for things. And if you sell it, at first, it will cost you more to sell to like 2 people. But if you price your thing at lower than the willingness to pay, they're probably going to buy it because they, oh, I'm actually getting some value out of this. Awesome. If you can bring your costs down over time as you ship more and more of this stuff, remember, the cost of distribution of software is basically 0. So we can get this to scale a lot. The profit we make in that green bit that's coloured in should make up for the losses we make earlier. Penetration pricing. It's well known in marketing, totally fine. But this is what tech startups pricing looks like. Do you see the problem? Show of hands, who sees the problem there? Like, yeah, where's the green bit? Yeah, so there is another way of doing this, which is like, well, maybe that doesn't matter because, well, it's a loss leader. We don't actually expect to make money like that. Like, we've seen that before. There are other products that this works quite well. So razor blades, you buy the handle, but you keep it for a long time, and we actually make money by selling you blades. If the handle costs us money, that's fine. It's also the thinking that goes behind if you're not paying, you're the product. So we can give the product away for free, but what we actually sell is all of the data that we collect about you. Surveillance capitalism. That works out quite well for a bunch of people as well, which creates certain incentives. But what if I told you that none of this matters? What if I told you that it doesn't matter because that's not what the purpose of the system is? Because the purpose of a system is what it does. A lot of these startups are funded by venture capital. And venture capital is a system for turning investments into exits and paying back the money. It doesn't actually matter what the company does. If you can get someone else to buy you before profit happens, awesome. You cash out, it's great. You can sell your company to Google. They have lots of money, they bought heaps of people. So the early investors can cash out, make a lot of money, and wander off before we ever sort out that difficult, weird, fiddly profitability thing. It's like, great. Or you don't have to sell it to another company, you could sell it to everybody else in an IPO. And it never matters. Who's left holding the bag later on is who needs to worry about it. It's like, I got mine, I'm long gone. That whole process normalized the idea that open source software should be free because people were doing it all the time. And it's because people mistook the creation of the artifact, the creation of this thing, we've built the product and we'll now give it away for free, and forgot about the maintenance bit. And that's what the open source sustainability crisis is actually about. It's not about software creation, it's about software maintenance. Who does it, why, and how? Because we've seen a few companies change their license as they discovered that this was actually what they needed to think about. And the conversation I hear every time they do this is what I hear in my head. It goes a bit like this. These companies are complaining about what their customers are doing that they explicitly asked them to do. Okay? So now we have to go on a bit of an economics detour. I know this is going to be a bit tricky, so I'll try to keep it energetic because we're all a little dusty today. Trust me, it's worth it. Let's learn about goods. Who knows what a good is? It's the opposite of a bad, that's right. There are 4 types of goods in economics. There used to be 2, and then they, like all good consulting type people, they added an extra axis to this so we could get a 2x2 matrix. We love these. You can see that there are 2 axes. The axis on the left is the exclusion difficulty. That's how hard is it for me to stop someone else getting or using this thing. And on the bottom is subtractability of use, which is that if I'm using a thing and you also use it, my experience gets worse. You made the thing worse by using it for everybody else. And this sort of works a bit better if I give examples. So we'll go through some examples. A private good is like a hammer or a sandwich. It's very easy to keep anyone else from having the sandwich. I can exclude you from the sandwich because there's only one sandwich and I have it, it's mine. You cannot have the sandwich. 2 people can't use the same hammer to hammer in a nail. Very well. I suppose you could technically give it a try. Let me film it and show me how it goes. Keen to see that. But if I eat the sandwich, you can't eat the sandwich too. So it has high subtractability of use. And then we have a thing called a club good, or a toll good as it's generally called now. That's a resource that a small group can use together and no one person really wears it out that much. Like if you flick the switch too often and you wear it out, you won't be able to do a light switch wave anymore. But if you're all going to a rave, you're all at a club, you're there to do that, it's probably okay. But it's also quite easy to keep people out because it's a private club. You can't come in, certainly not in those shoes. And then we have what people are pretty familiar with, which is the idea of a public good. So a lighthouse is an example. You can't really stop boats from seeing the lighthouse. Once it's there, everyone can see it. Everybody benefits from the fact that it's there. Really hard to keep people out. But me seeing the light, if I'm on a boat and I can see that it's over there, I can't really stop or wear out the light just by looking at it. And I don't really affect the boat that's over there. We can all see the lighthouse. We all benefit from it. It's a public good. And then there's this 4th one, which is a bit weird. And that's called a common pool resource. It's not really a pool, although it could be. It's more like there's a fishery just off the coast there, or like a forest. One person catching a fish slightly degrades the resource because there's no one else can catch that fish or eat that fish. And if there's too much fishing, overfishing, there's less fish for everyone and maybe the resource gets destroyed. So that's a common pool resource. It's really hard to keep people out of it. Fishery is in the ocean. It's quite tricky to stop other people coming and fishing in what you decide is your waters, as Australia is finding out in certain parts up around Indonesia. But it's also subtractable. It has reasonable subtractability of use in that if you fish too much, the fish are gone, no more resource. So those are the 4 types of goods. Okay. Audience participation time again. What is software? What sort of good is software? Just yell out, it's fine. Any guesses?
Depends on the license.
Correct. All of them. Software is every kind of good. Because it depends on what kind of software it is. So we can have proprietary software. I wrote it, it's mine, it's on my laptop, none of you can have it. It's like a sandwich. I use it up and it's done. But not quite like a sandwich because it's quite hard to wear out software, which is important because that kind of what led to free and open source software is that, well, it doesn't really wear out. So if you've built it, you can just give copies to everyone else for free. It's like, and it's quite hard to keep software private because copying it once means if you share it at all, suddenly everyone has one. And then we have club goods, which is like, well, I'll charge a toll for you to access this. Software as a service is basically a toll good. If you pay money to be in the club and I say, yes, you're allowed to come in because I like your shoes, you are allowed to use my SaaS. But no one else can. And I can't get hold of the software behind it either. It's kept quite closed, so I can protect it. I can keep people out. And you've got public goods, which is stuff like ELISA. It's software. It exists. It's been built. It's an artifact. You can copy it, study it, do all sorts of things with it. But it doesn't really get maintained. It's a static thing. And that, I think, is a really important thing to observe about the nature of software and the sustainability of software. Because sustaining ELISA is pretty easy because it doesn't change. But free and open source software does change all the time. That's an important thing. So how did we get here in the first place? Why did we do this? Why did we end up treating open source software like it was like ELISA, that it was an artifact that we would share and everyone would just study rather than more like a product? Why did the artifact end up with so much prominence? And that's where I want to give a shout out to someone else who's already done all the hard work for me. Christopher Neugebauer gave this talk a little while ago, and it's about the history of open source and how we got here. I won't go over all of the details, but one point he makes is how consumers have been elided into becoming producers with a bit of rhetorical sleight of hand. So how many people know the phrase, with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow? Yeah? Yeah. Nah. Because open source is an ecosystem with software artifacts. The artifacts are important, sure, but they're not the main thing. There are consumers and users, but there are also producers of the artifacts, some of whom are also users, and also community organisers, marketplace coordinators, etc. So this conference, for example, is part of that open source ecosystem. Open source is about how software gets built and maintained, because we're not really concerned with static software like ELISA that we just research and study. That's cool and good, and yes, we should definitely do that. But really what we're about here in the living, breathing world of open source software is we're talking about maintenance. We are stuck in a twisty maze of dependencies that are all constantly changing. And there is some evidence that developers use open source contributions as a kind of loss leader or marketing exercise for themselves. Like, I'll write some software and I'll publish it and I'll show people how good I am at it, and then maybe they'll hire me and I'll make some money out of it. Like, cool. This research, the quote is from, the research is from 2009. I'd say there's quite a bit more evidence now about how this has worked out, and it's really well for a couple of individuals. But hey, work for free for a bit and maybe we'll give you some money. That sounds a lot like working for exposure. And even penguins die from exposure. Don't get me wrong, some people make pretty good money from open source software, but the majority don't. And it's not really got any formal structure, or there's not really a lot of like formality about how that works. It's kind of accidental. You just get lucky. And you don't have to, but it creates risk for everybody, because I would say that this is roughly what the ecosystem looks like, in my opinion. And I want to point out a few points here that are important. Like, as a consumer, it's great. I get to use stuff for free, and that's awesome. I get a lot of benefits out of it. It's amazing what I can do with free software, and all of us. Sweet. But if you're a hobbyist, it's like, oh, you actually contribute a bit and you write a bit of software. It's like, well, maybe the payoff, you're right on the payoff line. It's like, it's a bit of effort, but I actually get enough benefit. Cool. Okay, maybe that's worth it. Then you've got vendors. You've got some vendors who just go, hey, cool. People have a lot of free software that they've just put out there. Awesome. Yoink. I will take that, put it in my product, and I will sell that for money. And if it breaks, not my problem. That sounds cool. I get lots of benefits and it costs me very little. Contributors, a bit more effort, not so great. And you've got other vendors who contribute quite a bit. We love them, awesome. But there's not really anything forcing them to do that. They just sort of happened. And then you've got maintainers. Maintainers are in an interesting position. For most of them, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of downsides to it. You get some benefits out of it, sure, but you're basically like a hobbyist, but with extra costs. It's a lot of extra work. Now, you might, after working for exposure for quite some time, you might get lucky. But there are two kinds of lucky. There is the good kind of lucky, in which case you become a famous maintainer and you are world renowned for doing this. You know, Linus Torvalds, everyone knows who that is. Guido van Rossum, who founded Python. Drupal has its own, quite a few actually when I did some research on this one, so I'm not going to name them, also because I will murder the pronunciation of many of their names. So apologies, but I'm avoiding murdering your name on purpose. But then there's the other kind of famous. The kind of famous that is like being a woman on the internet kind of famous. And that means that as a maintainer, your costs go up a lot. Still some benefits, sure, but the trade-off doesn't look that great. So we built this system, and the purpose of a system is what it does. That's right. Lots and lots of people, especially for-profit companies, really like this system because they get a lot of benefits out of it. And just recently, a bunch of people started going, wait, hang on, that's not what I meant. There was too much focus on software as an artifact, as an act of consumption. But what about the production side? What about the maintenance side? What about all of the activities that we need to keep this thing sustained? That was the big mistake, I think. But we have a solution. And like many things, the reason we haven't heard about this solution is because it was discovered by a woman. This is Elinor Ostrom. She is awesome. I love her work. That is one of the reasons why I'm talking to you today. She won the Nobel Prize, technically the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel from 2009. So the Economics Nobel. Some people think it's not quite the same thing. Basically is. She was born in 1933 in California in the USA, and at the time of the award she was in Indiana University. Unfortunately, she's dead now. She died in 2012, 5 years after winning the Nobel Prize. And the prize was won for her analysis of economic governance, especially the commons. So this was Ostrom's focus, was common pool resources like fisheries and forests. Specifically, she went and looked at them and looked at what actually happened. Not what some racist economic weirdos imagined would happen to a market full of perfectly spherical point consumers with zero mass. And I am referring, of course, to this terrible paper that I encourage you to never ever mention again. Unless it is to point at this article, which will explain why it's a terrible idea. Ostrom had already proved that the tragedy of the commons was not a thing when the silly paper was published in the first place. And it's well past time citing it as if it means anything. It deals with some stuff which might be true if you squint hard enough in a tiny little bit of some theoretical markets, but largely it never happens because it assumes that humans are incapable of learning. More importantly, let's talk about Ostrom. Don't want to talk about that other silly paper. These are design principles. This is pretty much the core of Ostrom's work. If you have most of these characteristics, you are more likely to have a successfully maintained project or product. It's not a guarantee. They're tools that can help. So I say that if open source software, free and open source software, is a common pool resource, this framework should help us because, for two reasons. It can help us diagnose the problems, and it can also help us figure out what the solutions are. This framework gives us some ideas about what we could do instead. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm going to cherry pick out a few of the ones that I think are the most important. These are the three. I'll deal with them in order. First one is about congruence. So this is, well, it's a fancy economics textbook type way of explaining that the costs and the benefits should be roughly even for the people who are participating in that market. So if I am incurring costs to participate in open source software, I should get benefits back that are roughly equal. This conversation that people are having, that is because of a lack of congruence. They're complaining about what customers are doing that they specifically asked them to do, which was, here, have all of the benefits and incur none of the costs. Well, that seems weird, because why do we design a system? Because the purpose of a system is what it does, and we just designed a system that allocates most of the costs to people who, most of the benefits to people who incur none of the costs. Whoops, maybe we should not do that. Because systems are way more powerful than individuals. when we're looking at what would we do instead, there are a lot of people who are trying to do things that seem to focus more on individuals. Like, let's go to these big companies and say, please be nice. And one or two of them are, and most of them aren't, because the systemic incentives encourage them not to be. Asking an individual at a big corporation to please sponsor my open source conference is pretty brittle, because it's great when they're there and they like it and they support it and it's awesome, and then they leave and then the rest of the company doesn't care. And they stop sponsoring your conference, and then it's really, really hard to put conferences on, as everyone who has been running these conferences over the last year and a half is finding out. It's tough out there. But if you're running a company and you're getting money from VCs who happen to be into this thing and they really like open source, well, what if they change their mind? You know, they might get bored and move on to cryptocurrency or NFTs or AI or whatever it is today. Whatever the shiny thing is, and they'll stop donating to your charity. Oh, because that's right. Are you running a business or are you running a charity? Charities take in money from donors and then give all of the benefits away for free. So what are you doing here? Are you really a business, or are you a charity, or are you running something else? What if people have different views about what you should be doing and how that should happen? How do you figure that out? Well, you need conflict resolution mechanisms. And I think that here in open source, we've done a terrible job of figuring out what those conflict resolution mechanisms should be before we need them. We have relied way too heavily on the commercial legal mechanisms like contracts, including like the copyleft licenses. We've spent all of our time just trying to lean on those existing systems that are designed to sort out private proprietary software, not so much common pool resources. And these mechanisms are really slow. They exact a high cost on participants and mediators and the community and ecosystem at large. As I take a look at the project that runs approximately 43% of the world's websites, for example. I'm sure you know which one I'm referring to. How's that going at the moment? Conflict resolution. Is that all done really fast and easy? Low cost? Yeah, that's going to be fun. It went quiet, didn't it? We'll find out what's going on with that soon, I hope. But the way we've designed these systems means we don't get to use collective choice arrangements much, right? This may shock some of you, but companies are not democracies. As much as the Americans like to talk about democratizing everything, when was the last time you voted for what any of these companies do? Yeah. Some of the projects are run by a benevolent dictator for life, which is quite democratic, I think, apparently. Many are moving away from that. Python, famously, moved away from that. It's in Christopher's talk. We also saw some similar moves elsewhere. Mastodon, the social media network that some of you may be aware of, similarly kind of has a benevolent dictator, but they're making moves to step away from that and go to more of a community governance model. We can design systems that work that way, because the purpose of a system is what it does. So let's design systems that do what we want them to do, not something else. And I think we have a really great opportunity to do that right now, because the software industry is about to undergo a major disruption, and it's not from AI. It is not anything internal to the tech industry at all. And the industry is not remotely ready for what is about to happen to it. But open source is very well placed to take advantage of the changes that are coming. Let me explain. Because humans are more important than computers. And that is what a lot of people not in the tech industry have decided that we need to learn, because they are really fed up with us. And who can blame them? Because we have tried all sorts of stuff and it is terrible. Regular people are really sick of their stuff being broken constantly. In fact, I was talking to one of the AV guys just before this talk, talking about his other operating system, and now he's moved to an open source one. Open source gets better over time. The commercial stuff seems to be getting worse. People feel like they're getting spied on all the time. They don't get a choice about what's put into their software. It downloads new stuff that puts ads on their television or ads in their operating system that they never said yes to. When was the last time you saw a button that said, would you like this, yes or no? It's never that. It's always yes or maybe later. People are really sick of that. And regulation is coming for this. Privacy legislation helps a lot, but the EU is way ahead on some other stuff, because cybersecurity is seen as a matter of national security. So that gets people's attention in a way that privacy kind of doesn't, particularly governments. Governments Really keen on national security? Privacy, not quite so much. Privacy for me, yeah, absolutely. But you peons, no, we need to keep an eye on what you're doing because it may not be good. Who knows? You might try to take us down. Meanwhile, large corporations get to take down huge numbers of systems globally for a whole day. That tends to get people's attention, and then we get stuff like legislation that says, yeah, that's bad, we should stop that. Legislation generally is written first in blood and then in ink, but in this case, not quite as many people have died yet. So they're trying to get ahead of it and putting in some legislation. So these are a couple of examples. We have some from the EU, which is actually really good. I'll talk about why in a moment. But we have some in Australia as well, and it's starting with Internet of Things, because people have realised that there's all these devices living around the place which have computers in them and they never get patched or maintained, and that's pretty bad because they run botnets and take over everything else. So maybe the people who make them should have to take responsibility for what's in them. Maybe they don't just get to make a product and throw it out there into the world, they have to maintain it. Product liability is coming for software. It already kind of does in Australia. The Australian consumer law doesn't say that software gets an exemption just because you've got a big boilerplate thing saying no warranty at all. It's like, yeah, no, actually there is a warranty. There's a statutory warranty in this country at least. And the EU is kind of going a bit further than that and saying that we're going to have legislation that says, well, actually, if you have a commercial product, you are liable for what it does. And I don't care where you got software from. It's in your product. It's like, if you're an open source initiative or project or whatever, it's fine. Yeah, you aren't subject to the same rules because this is a public good. We like what you're doing here. But if you're a commercial company, they're trying to create some incentives that mean that you will go and work on this open source stuff because it changes the incentives. The costs are going to go up for commercial companies who have been yoinking all of this open source stuff and putting it into products and then making huge amounts of money while never contributing back. So this is a systemic change to try to realign the costs and benefits, which is why I think it's going to be more likely to be successful than individual efforts. And I think other people will notice and catch on. And open source has a really big advantage here. Because when that happens, when product liability comes for software, and all of a sudden I am on the hook for all the open source stuff that I just found on the side of the street and went, ooh, cool, yoink, put that in my product. I don't care what's in it. It's free, who cares? It's like, might be poisonous, might contain dragons. It could be awesome, who knows? When it explodes and kills people, I get to sit back and go, not my deal. Found it, totally fine, not my problem. It's like, no, not anymore. So for a lot of companies, they have to make a decision. Do I look at all this free software that I just picked up and put in my product and then rebuild all of it at my personal expense? Or do I pay someone else to make the problem go away? Maybe I pay for insurance. Maybe I pay a group of people who built the software and can understand how to maintain it and make it not explode and kill people. Maybe I should get them to do it rather than trying to do all of the work myself, and all the companies can figure this out together. So actually, we would have to all write our own operating system from scratch. Good luck with that. Or we could just buy one commercially. Or maybe we can sponsor some people to do it. Liability for failure is what will encourage companies with money to give it to other people. And because open source is already in everything, ripping it out is going to be really, really hard. So that's not what's going to happen, I don't think. I think that companies will start sponsoring more projects when the costs for them go up. There are, of course, other options. One option is socialism, like the German Sovereign Tech Fund, which is a country has decided actually these projects are kind of nationally, or they're important and probably nationally significant. We think that having curl in everything is something we should maybe make sure that curl is quite good, so we will give money to that project. There is a bit of a free rider problem in that, well, Germany's doing it, so maybe none of the rest of us have to. We get to take the benefits for free, so maybe some countries will get together and go, actually, if you are nice to us and you subscribe to this idea, you can get the security patches immediately. And if you're over there and don't agree, maybe you won't. Maybe we will negotiate about the nature of certain global tariffs that are being imposed right now, and the countries that sponsor all this stuff might use that as leverage. Just an idea. There is also a public health approach, and we are seeing a bit of that, which is generally to whack a label on everything. Trust marks are starting to happen. They're voluntary, so they're not really going to do much in the short term. They do work a bit in the long term. They kind of shift public perception about what is acceptable. So if you would like to go and put a cyber rating sticker on as many things as you like, you can go to that URL. There is a website that will let you generate your own. Do play around with the numbers. You might find some fun facts. Apparently the government is going to do one of these as well, but they haven't spoken to me about licensing this idea. I came up with it first, so come talk to me if you run that thing. It's already done. We can just roll it out. People already know what that looks like. The other option is that we can just stop working for free. You can just say no. It's your project. With great power comes great responsibility. Sure, yeah, but we've erred a bit too much on the responsibility side, and we haven't really done anything on the power side. You can just tell companies, no, I'm not going to patch your bug for free. Like, it's a big security reason. I didn't make you pick up my software off the side of the road and shove it in your commercial thing. Like, bummer. Like, totally fix it if you throw in some cash, though. Capitalism, it's great, isn't it? Let's see how much they like it. We can have a look at the system that we built and change it. We do have that power. There is a huge opportunity here for open source software if we invest in the systems and infrastructure that we need. It's probably the best opportunity that we've had in years. I think that governance of common pool resources, the work of Elinor Ostrom, is something that we can use to make things better. I don't think it's going to solve it. I don't think it's going to make everything immediately magically better, but I do believe that it will help us make things better in ways that we haven't tried before. I think that it will allow us to diagnose what's going wrong and then do something about it, rather than try these other things which we're just sort of throwing things at the wall hoping for the best. The research is there. Let's use it. So I hope that as you go about the conference, and indeed the rest of your working careers and lives and things in general, life in general, that you remember these 4 things. That maintenance is more important than creation. That ecosystems matter more than artifacts. That systems are that systems are more powerful than individuals, and that humans are more important than computers. And there's one more thing. I want you to remember that the purpose of a system is, hooray, what it does. What kind of world do you want to live in? What should the systems look like in that world? And how do we get there from here together? Thank you. Oh, sure. If we have time for questions, I'm more than happy to do that. So
Does anyone have any questions?
We have... Oh, I came in on time. Awesome. We're a little late going, so I wasn't sure how we'd go.
Okay,
yes.
so that corner. Yeah.
The lights are
Lee?
really bright. I do apologise. Can we run a mic to...
In the 4 quadrants you had false in the top right. But some projects, like Drupal, for example, have been now classified as a digital public good. Does that push them over into the square liza? Or is that just a marketing exercise?
It's probably a marketing exercise. Look at what does it do? The purpose of a system is what it does. So, does it change? Does Drupal need to change and adapt as life goes on? Does it need maintenance?
Yeah.
Then it's probably not a public good. It's not static, so it's not an artifact. It's an ecosystem. So if it's an ecosystem, we need to keep it alive, and that means it needs governance, and it's probably a common pool resource. I think. Feel free to argue with me. I'm not an economist. I haven't won a Nobel Prize. I just point at people who do. So I'm a consultant. My job is to point at work other people have done and get the credit.
Can I suggest an amendment to your T-shirt? I'm over here, by the way.
Okay, you're right on the line. Yes, cool. Yes?
If the purpose to a system is what it does,
Yes.
and my system produces frustration for my users,
Yes.
That doesn't quite sound right. I'd suggest that the purpose of a system is what you are seeking to make it do, or
No,
why it exists.
It's not. I'm glad you said that, because again, not my idea. A guy called Stafford Beer came up with this, and he did a lot of work on systems. Created a thing called, or he was part of a movement called cybernetics, which has had a bit of a resurgence of late. So he was very, very specific about saying that the purpose of a system is what it does, not what you imagine it to do or what you meant or what you thought it should do. The purpose of a system is what it is actually doing right now. If your intention was different, then you need to change the system. Because right now, its intention, it doesn't think for itself. It has no, it doesn't have a brain to do its own thing. It does what you built it to do. So you built it wrong, is what I would say. But you built it so you can change it. You just have to want to. Any other questions?
Just for those who don't know, Drupal is also partially funded by, or has been a grant recipient of the Sovereign Tech Fund.
Hey!
So it's like it's used to help us get GitLab faster. Correct.
Yeah, we love the Sovereign Tech Fund. I wish more countries took that idea and ran with it. It's been really, really impactful.
Yeah, even like big countries that use Drupal for like their federal websites, you mean?
It's just an idea. I mean, liberal democracy. It's a thing we could try.
Okay, great. So everyone, let's thank Justin for a great presentation.